Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the New Deal. And the New Deal was a program set in place by President Franklin Roosevelt that really tried to help people during the Great Depression. So remember, during this time, Americans are very, very, very poor. They don't have a lot of jobs, they don't have money, a lot of them can't afford to live in houses, they can't afford food. So this is one of the worst times in American history. And first we're going to talk about Franklin D. Roosevelt. Usually he's just known as FDR. And he won the presidential election in 1932 over former President Herbert Hoover. So Herbert Hoover was president when the Depression started in 1929. But a lot of people didn't like what he was doing. He didn't really get involved. He thought it would get better, and he thought people needed to work harder. But Roosevelt was much different. He created the New Deal to try to bring the United States out of the Great Depression. And he has a famous speech where he said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." And he gave this speech to restore public confidence and quiet anxiety concerning the Great Depression. So he didn't want people to be afraid anymore when he said this. He said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. So he's saying don't be afraid. You guys can go out, you can get a job, it's okay to buy some stuff, that life will go on. So he doesn't want people to be afraid anymore. He wants to restore public confidence. And here are the objectives of the New Deal. One part of it was relief. He wanted to ease the hardships of the Depression. Another part was recovery, which these were efforts to end the Depression. And last was reform. He wanted efforts to prevent another Depression and or change the economic system. And the New Deal is very important because it had many long-term effects on the United States government and society. So the government does a lot of things now because of how we acted during the New Deal. And the role of the federal government changed, transforming American politics, the economy, and society. And a lasting effect of the New Deal is that the government should assume responsibility for well-being of its citizens, which means the government should take care of its citizens. It used to be if you were sick or you got hurt or you were broke, or you couldn't afford lunch at school, things like that, the government used to not do anything. They used to think, well, we're not in charge of that, we're not responsible for that. But now the government does a lot of this stuff. They give people money if they get hurt, they have free lunch at schools, if you can't afford college, they might give you some money. So the government's very involved now in helping its citizens, and that started with the New Deal. And the New Deal also expanded the government's role in the economy. The government used to not monitor banks, it didn't do anything with the stock market, but now the government is very involved with it. So the New Deal, as we said, it was already started by Franklin Roosevelt, and it changed the role of government to a more active participant in solving problems. So that's what we're going to learn about. The government became active. And Roosevelt, one thing he was known for was his fireside chats. And this is when Franklin Roosevelt would often go on the radio to defend his rationale for New Deal programs. And these radio broadcasts were known as fireside chats. A lot of people, he might say, his radio broadcast would come on at 5 p.m. And a lot of Americans would go on the radio and they would listen to what he had to say about the New Deal. So now we're going to start talking about the actual programs. And the first one is called the Works Progress Administration. And this was a relief measure. And Works Progress Administration, which is the WPA, employed millions of unemployed people to work on public works projects, which it means it paid people to build roads, bridges, airports, dams, trails, train stations, etc. And when I say dam, I'm referring to this type of dam. It protects water, and it's so you can use water for drinking or farming. Not the bad word. This is a dam right here. And this is important because it gave millions of Americans jobs and it provided relief to unemployed Americans. So this gave jobs to unemployed Americans. Remember, unemployed means you don't have a job. So this is good because unemployed people are now working and the government's paying them to build things people need. We need roads, we need bridges, we need airports, we need dams, we need trails. So these are all things that help Americans, and it's also nice because it's paying people to do it. And the Works Progress Administration helped decrease the unemployment rate. So more people now have jobs, there's less people who aren't working. And recovery programs were designed to bring the nation out of the Depression over time. And one of those is the Agricultural Adjustment Act, and it provided payment to farmers who left their farms unseeded or unworked. So in other words, farmers got money. This is a recovery measure. So remember, a lot of farmers were struggling during this time. There was talked about how they didn't have money, a lot of them had to move, but this gave them money to stay on their farms. And now we're going to talk about a reform. And remember, reform, that's where they wanted to do something so the Great Depression would never happen again. So reform measures corrected unsound banking and investment practices, which means banks had to be more careful with loans and putting money in the stock market. And the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, also known as the FDIC, protected deposits up to $5,000. And you might say $5,000, that's not that much, but $5,000 is about $250,000 today, so that's a lot of money. And this was created to protect deposits from the instability of banks during the Great Depression. And what this means is if banks ever close, the FDIC will give you your money. So today, if you have $250,000 in the bank and the bank closes, the FDIC, which is a government program, it will give you your money back so you don't lose it. So you're safe even if the bank closes. And they did this because people stopped putting money in the bank, but now people have trust in banks again because you get the money back no matter what. And this was a reform measure. And the last thing we're going to talk about is the Social Security Act, which is very important. It's still around today, and it offered safeguards for workers by offering old age benefits for workers, benefits for victims of industrial accidents, unemployment of the handicapped, and people who are old. So what this means is people who are old, people who are hurt, disabled, people who are unable to work, get money from the government. So if you break your leg and you can't work for 6 months, the government will actually give you some money during that time. If you fall from work at your job and you break your back and you're no longer able to work, you become disabled, which this is a disabled person right here, the government gives you money because you can't work. And what happens is at some point you're going to be 80 years old and you are not going to be able to work anymore, and the government will give you money when you get old. So right now, I think it's 68 years old, but if you're 68 years old and you can't work anymore, the government will give you some money so you don't have to worry about it. And Social Security continues to have a large impact on the economy today. And I'm just fixing this real quick. And that's it. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Next class, we're going to start our review, and we'll be testing after that. So the test is coming up soon, but don't worry, next class we'll review. And if you have any questions, let me know.